Yeah, you need protein as a human, but like, I don't know. I guess I grew up with like a lot of emphasis on like, oh, you're a vegetarian and that being a problem.
Hmm.
Like people were like really concerned with me and really thought it was like not an optimal diet.
Hmm.
People still think that.
Hmm. To some degree.
Yeah. People like, yeah. A lot of my friends have been like, ooh, you should probably eat fish in the past. Um, and then my parents like constantly trying to put like tofu in things as a
Hmm.
kid and being very concerned that like they weren't giving us enough like nutrition. And I guess like I eat in a way that isn't what most people consider optimal.
Hmm.
However, I seem to be fine.
Hmm.
Like I'm not falling over. That whole thing has like been very confusing for me my whole life because it's felt like from other people that I should be falling over from fatigue or whatever it is. I never have been. So that's what confuses me about like the whole what should one eat?
I think not falling over is quite a low bar.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
So seriously,
Yeah.
So in terms of like what a body can, like, it depends on what you're thinking about, because what a human body needs to survive, I'm sure we can survive on all kinds of crazy weird shit.
Mhm.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's the optimal diet.
Yeah, and it's also like optimal for what? Like depending on like the level of exercise or like the amount of things you're doing, you're gonna need different things. So yeah, I guess it is like what are we talking about here?
Mhm.
Like what's your optimal life and what do you need to sustain that? So for someone who's like mostly sedentary, I don't know. I don't know
I mean,
what
you're
this.
clearly
It makes me
okay.
feel like there's like this, and I've had this for. There's like this phantom version of me that has more energy or something
Mhm.
that gets more nutrients.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's.
Of course, that's true. Of course, you could be getting more nutrients.
Yeah, yeah. But so like, do I seem low energy to you?
I don't know.
Do you know what I mean? Like, is there? I don't know. I don't know what I'm missing. That's basically it.
I mean, you do seem low energy to me, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Right. That's the other thing too. Yeah. Like energy can be all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want.
Some people like just like jump out of bed and like taking on tasks. It's not necessarily like because of what they eat. They just have that personality. Anyway.
I don't actually think that there's anything to be confused about. I really don't. I do think that there's a lot of misinformation, and I do think a lot of people are confused.
Yeah.
But based on what I think that you know about food, like, I don't know if it's actually confusion as much as like, is what I'm doing okay?
Yeah.
Which no one else can really say. And you get to be whatever level of health you want. You don't have to eat optimally. That's not like you don't owe it to anybody unless it's something that you are interested in doing.
Mhm.
You know? So yeah, you're not falling over. So it depends on what the bar is. It depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah. It can be scary.
What can be scary?
Did I? Why? I told a lot of people this. I remember talking to my sister at one point. think I've told you this. About like jokingly being like, I wonder what we're gonna be like in our old age. She was like, Nessa, you're not gonna be around in your old age.
What?
Yeah.
That's a really messed up thing to say.
She's like,
What? First of all, so many things. So many things.
unpack that. There you go.
First of all, what a fucking thing to say. That's bullshit. I don't care if that's what she thinks. That's an effed up thing to say.
Yeah.
Also, it's really weird that she thinks it's so
Obvious.
obvious because that's like the least. I mean, not only is it not obvious, it's like not a fact. It's like some idea. What do you mean?
I don't know. I think it means that like the way I take care of myself is not sufficient to live into old age.
I don't think that's true.
So I wonder a lot about like, yeah, am I running at a deficit and like one day it's all gonna hit me.
I'll
hard.
take a bet with you.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
What's your bet?
It's kind of fucked up.
What is it?
It's about your lifespan. It's about you and your sister's lifespans.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
No, I'm just kidding.
He's gonna die first.
I don't think she's right.
I mean, she said that was like a few years ago, but it obviously like, and there's kind of been that fear pretty much my entire life. It's like, I don't take care of myself.
I mean, maybe you haven't, but that doesn't need to be like a then law of the universe. You know, maybe in the past you haven't taken care of yourself. That doesn't necessarily mean that's who you will be for eternity.
Yeah, and maybe actually like talking about this, I'm like, oh, maybe this was like really early instilled as a kid, like going over to parents' houses and being like, I'm a vegetarian, and kind of their like response to that was very uneasy. Just wasn't a thing. So maybe that put doubt into my
Probably.
mind. Yeah.
But that doesn't seem like something that's worth carrying around.
No.
I really don't think that people who don't eat meat are unhealthy. I don't.
Right?
Yeah. So like, at least in terms of that, well, it's not worth dragging on.
How are you feeling on the diet?
I don't know. A part of me wants to like already see so many results, and other parts of me are like, this is work. I don't know. There's like all these different voices.
Yeah?
Sure.
Are you noticing anything?
Yeah, of course. But again, like I said from day one, I don't know if it's that I'm like, yeah, you got like, I don't know how much it's like motivational thinking. I don't know the facts.
Kind of like placebo. Did you take a before picture?
Yes.
Great.
You have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose
Post about you on Instagram.
not without your permission, they can't. What was I doing?
We're both.
Yeah, I suppose it's 1 week in. I suppose I could like put on the exact same thing and stand in the exact same place and be like, is there not? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't like, again, everyone's different, and clearly, as I mentioned to you, there's someone who's like, I've already lost 2 pounds and it's been 1 week.
Right.
It made me be like, what? But it doesn't necessarily mean anything. Nothing's happening the first week also. So I'm trying to find the balance of like enough motivation to keep going and like stay the course, as opposed to like, why am I even doing this? Because I'd like to see it through. It's 6 weeks. Like, even if it whatever does or doesn't happen, I would like to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would like to see more. I think it would be easier to stick to it if there were a bit more. I don't know though. Because on the one hand, I think it would be easier to stick to it if I was seeing visible differences. But in my past, anytime I like see some kind of positive thing, I'm like, cool. Now that I've demonstrated that I can do that, I'm gonna go eat everything.
Oh.
So it doesn't always have the same.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Like you can sit back and relax once you're like, great, I can check this off
Like,
my list now.
oh, look, fantastic! I'm gonna eat a fucking donut because I can. Like that.
Yeah.
Like, clearly I've conquered donuts if I have eaten as many as I have in my adult life, and still am in like decent shape. Clearly, like, I'm amazing, and this is stupid.
That's like, so it's like, oh, she's really fit and she eats donuts. Ergo, donuts equal fit.
Yeah. I actually have a thing where the thing that I would like to be more than anything is, and this is a little bit fixed mindset probably. The thing that I would like to be more than anything is like super in shape and also eating donuts. I know that obviously who doesn't want that? I don't mean that in a way that's like, I mean that there's like an extra value in the combination.
Definitely.
I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I'm old as shit.
No, because there can kind of seem sometimes to be something like a little bit like precious about someone who's like, no, I can't eat complex carbs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if you're able to like eat whatever the fuck you want and be a boss, like, you're winning.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So the appointment was crazy.
Yeah. Tell me. I haven't heard anything.
I know. I don't know how I've shut my mouth. It's been a lot to process.
Really?
I mean, and that must be what I've been doing literally since 10 o'clock because I have not done anything else.
Right. So you're just digesting.
Yeah.
That I don't know. The stars.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I said that very weird. That's crazy.
It's bad news.
No, it's really not. Apparently, I'm great. Yeah, he was pretty like excited about my fucking natal chart and was excited to talk about it. He like is so sweet and lovely. And
David, is that his name?
No, Robert.
Robert. I don't know where I got David.
I don't either. And I heard this first thing I heard this morning was the remixed Skype ringing sound.
Oh yeah.
I almost like recorded it and then I was like, this is not important. I'm sure I can experience this again someday.
I'm sure you can just Spotify that.
Yeah, seriously. It sounds good though. The remix.
Oh yeah,
it's good. Yeah. I almost didn't want to pick up because I was jamming so hard. Yeah, it was a lot of information. So this was, because it was my first time with him, this was akin to like my first thing with Eric, where there was a ton of information just about how he works and sort of what his understanding and framework is. And so there was a lot of that. And I've had a hard time summarizing to any of my family members today what happened in the appointment. Yeah, it's hard. I'm really, really relieved that there's a recording, and there were several times that I was like, what? And I'm excited to listen again. And he was like, if you come across anything that you're like, what are you talking about? Just message me. So he's like an astrologer.
Mhm.
So a lot of what he does is this like chart stuff, but he's also intuitive. So it ends up being sort of like a combo platter experience.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting because it's very different from the like pure astrological, like the only other experience I've had with an astrologer, that one guy.
Right.
It was very, he didn't speak at all to me. He literally sat there for 25 minutes, like in books, checking things, marking things down, doing calculations. And then like at the end of 20 minutes, we were just like sitting there one at a time, obviously. And then he just like looked up and was like, blah, 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 and just talked for several minutes straight. But it was like 7 minutes of talking to 20 minutes of like him sitting with these giant books.
Wow.
And yeah. And it was interesting because I'd never had any kind of experience like that before.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that to this guy, and he was like, yeah, it's basically, it bothers me when people are very prescriptive about natal charts, because the way I see it and the way that I work with it is that it's like a potential. It's like a framework of potential, and there's nothing in there that is unchangeable, really. And you don't necessarily, it's not like your chart will dictate what you do and don't do. It doesn't erase your free will. There's like all these, so the way he thinks of it is like a pretty dynamic, moving, I guess the potential isn't really moving, but you are moving within it. So that is interesting. So he doesn't do it. He doesn't really, like, he doesn't predict a lot of stuff. He tries to stay away from that for a few different reasons. Not the least of which is because he thinks that the best thing to do is to put people in as empowered of a situation at the end of their reading as they can be. And if that is the goal, then being like this is like really not that helpful.
Yeah. Because you're messing with people. You're messing with their own free will if you're saying this is how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Then people are going to sit back, and it's actually going to like change how they interact with the world. I don't know. It's all very, free will is all very interesting to me.
Yeah. I thought of that a couple of times because he basically says that it exists.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there were some really fascinating things that he said, like, we're talking about kids or something. And he was like, there was a situation in which if you had continued to go down that path, like you could have or would have had a kid.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, interesting. And then he was like, this is a little like esoteric and weird to say, but basically there are all of these potential possible lines of our existence that do keep going.
Yeah.
And that do dynamically speak to ours, which was crazy to me.
What does that mean, dynamically speak?
That means I can get information from a life of a version of my life that I did not choose to live.
So you can like learn those lessons without having lived it. Is it kind of like that? Like that person over there knows something that can help you without you having to be that person. In those.
Yeah, but I am that person.
But you are that. Right. Okay.
It's pretty nutty.
Yeah.
But also super cool.
Yeah.
Because that means that nothing's lost.
Right. Yeah, that all the decisions you make in life, it's not that they don't matter. It's just like, yeah, you're not cutting any bridges, actually.
Yeah, not really.
Hmm.
So all these lines like keep going out,
Yeah.
and you can have a more of a fluid interface with all of them than people sometimes think.
Huh. Okay.
And one of the things he said about it was that he was talking about like having children.
Yeah.
Um, and I said that I didn't really feel strongly one way or the other. And he said, that makes sense to me because there's like three types of soul contracts when it comes to kids. One is that you have a soul contract to have a kid. Another is that you have a soul contract not to have a kid, and the third is that it could go either way. And what I mean by could go either way is if it is that you have a soul contract to have a child, like my sister fully has one,
Hmm.
and that's something that like was obvious to me before any of this conversation happened. And if you choose not to have a child, then basically it increases the possibility of suffering on your this path.
Yeah.
Because it's like and doing the opposite of whatever your like contract is with that will pull you off of your spirit, pull you away from your spiritual path a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you don't have to have a kid if you have a spiritual contract to have a kid. But if you don't, it'll like have some impact on your soul's path.
Yeah. Okay. So what does that mean? Like is it kind of like you're making it hard for yourself?
Yeah, but there's no judgment. Yeah.
Well,
It'll
it's not
pull
like
you.
but it's like life won't. That to me sounds like, yeah, if you're on like your path, like things kind of work themselves out like naturally. And if you're not, that's when the forest gets really dense.
Mhm. So he said, there are some parents who have like people who have kids and are like, oh, my kids hate me, or I hate, like, whose children are these? Like, what is this? And in one of the possibilities there is that they had a social contract not to have kids, and they did.
Do you always feel it? Like, is it always apparent that like you feel strongly about not having children and then you have it? Or can it be something kind of more mysterious than
I'm
that?
sure it could be anything because your level of sensitivity and awareness has everything to do with all of this.
Mm.
So one of the things he said, which he was like, what do you think about past lives?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think there are past lives purely from an instinctual place,
Mm-hmm.
but I've got no sort of like dogmatic structure or intellectual explanation or theory that I'm behind. So like, I don't know. I don't have like past life memories, and yeah, I don't know. But my feeling
Mm-hmm.
is that this is not the first time. I just don't feel like it is.
Yeah.
And he was like, it certainly isn't. He said that he was like, guess how many lives you've had? And I was like,
What?
I'm not good with numbers.
He knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
4,000.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your first rodeo.
No. And he said, if you, what did he say? He was like, conservative estimate is 50 years. That means 200 and something years. 200 and something thousand years.
Okay.
He said I was
You're a high priestess.
kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
He said you're in your like mastery phase.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean you'll never come back.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean this is your last like life, but this is the home stretch. That's what he said.
Good. Pretty great.
Pretty great. Yeah, I'm only half kidding about that.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'm sure it's like what somebody needs to heal. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's lots of things.
I actually wonder about this. I've talked to you about like the Bodhisattva vow before, right? Which is basically that like all beings are enlightened and no one is enlightened until everyone is enlightened. So like those enlightened beings, the reason that they come back is like to shepherd all of us forward. So I always wonder about that in terms of like past lives, if like you only know it's your last life because you're like you're you're the Buddha. If that's like the only version of like the last life that it could possibly look like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably true from some like feeling place.
From some feeling place.
Yeah, like I don't think that only the Buddha got there. I think like everyone does.
Yeah, like basically it is it like you're enlightened, basically, if it's your last life, or does it look different and you're still like caught in being human?
You're still. I mean, these are all questions
Yeah,
that you can answer.
yeah, no, you don't. I want you to tell me.
I'm
After
not
your
in my
2 hour
last
session, right. But you're in your phase of mastery.
life. Yeah. So we said some kind of awkward things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Awkward, like the 16 personalities from your life.
Right.
Okay.
I was just thinking of that. I was like, of course you are. You're an advocate.
Yeah. So there were some things that I was like, I don't know what to say. Got kind of like weird and uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But also a lot of things you said, like, I felt like an internal agreement about. And I was like, yeah, to me that makes sense. He also was like, have you ever heard of the term starseed?
I think I have.
Have you? I
Yeah.
haven't. Basically, aliens. There are some people who have been people for their whole physically manifested lives on Earth,
Like this life or all of their lives?
all of their lives.
Okay.
Like have spent all of their lives as human beings on planet Earth.
Okay.
And then there are some people whose first physical manifestation of any kind was not on planet Earth, but was in a different place.
Okay.
And that is what that word refers to.
Okay.
So I might be an alien? I guess is what I'm saying.
A past life version of you. I don't know. Okay. He said that your first lives were in a different place.
I don't know about lives. He said first, the first physical manifestation.
Ah. Okay.
And much later in the conversation, I was saying something about Ishan,
Yeah.
and I was like, I'm so excited for him to. I was like, he's really nuts. Like, I don't know what word I used. And he was like, oh, I know, I've taken the peak already. And I was like, really? Because he's gonna do Ishan's thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, actually, that's interesting. Because there's a possibility that he and I fully was like, yeah, if I'm not fucking from here, that kid's not from here. And he, guess what he said? He said that Sean is also not from here.
Oh, well, yeah.
He was like, you've no, like, he said that the mathematical likelihood of that was pretty small.
I mean, maybe there's different versions of this when it comes to past lives. Like, if you believe in past lives, it seems like there are people who keep showing up.
For sure. But that I think is slightly different than, which is also going on. He was like, he basically thinks that he thinks there's a parent-child relationship that occurred between he and I before. So either if he feels like my parent or my kid in some moments, that there's a possibility that that way of relating has actually already happened. But this is apart from that.
Oh, okay. It's just that you're of the same stuff. Okay.
From the same.
Yeah.
Which he says is very unlikely.
It would be so interesting to get a reading on him at this age. I guess it'll all be potential. Yeah. I mean, it is, but even more glaringly so.
Mhm.
Whew.
And I don't think Aditi would do it if she thought that anything about it was prescriptive or any kind of like making fixed points for him that then he had to, treat as being real or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think she, I know she wouldn't do it if it were like that. He said a lot about the amount of feminine energy in my chart, which I was like, what? Then I started to say this to my parents and started to say, like, I don't think of myself as being very feminine energy. I think of myself as being very, like, yang energy.
What did they say?
That they think it's both.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of that left brain thing.
I think some of your like, I want to say ferocity, and I only mean that by like the depth up to which you go. Okay, actually strikes me as feminine.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't.
Like your protective nature, your like, I don't know, your fighter nature. To me, it seems like a mama bear. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what. Then maybe I'm like mislabeling things,
Yeah. I don't know. The whole like masculine, feminine thing. I think a lot of people just see. There's a lot of like ideas floating up in the air, and it's. Like, I don't know. It can get muddled. What was he pointing to with like the femininity in your chart? What was he trying to say about that?
A few different things. One is to make some comment on the level of sensitivity there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also did end up talking about a little bit about at some point in the future, if and when it feels right, sort of not dissimilar than Eric, like trusting my like brain.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't say the word brain, but he basically was saying to trust more in, to place more trust in the feminine nature. Rather than seeing it sort of as like a liability and a thing that really needs to be like reined in, or because like that's where sensitivity is, that's also where feeling is, and fluidity, and all of those things.
Yeah.
Basically to say like this thing that you perceive as a weakness is also a strength, and part of the work hopefully is to allow your actual nature without like taking drugs and shit.
Yeah.
Like that it might not be something that I have to spend my whole life protecting against.
Do you believe in like the female stereotypes or like archetypes? That's a better word for it. You know what I mean when I say that?
I mean, I know what the words mean, but I don't know what you mean.
Like that, particularly what I'm thinking of is like they say that when women pass into like basically like post menopause, they actually like uh, mature into a kind of female power that's called like the crone
Mhm.
or the hag. It's like always a really bad negative name. Oh, but yeah, this is like totally Estes. Yeah, yeah. So do you believe in that? That like
Yeah, of course.
at a certain like age of maturation, yeah, your like female powers come out in full force.
I don't think it happens to like every. I don't know. Maybe.
That human design. There's like different. What the hell is it called? I forget what it's called, but there's like apparently like different like life paths that different people have, and mine is split up with like the way that it's structured says that like the first third of my life is incredibly difficult.
Mhm.
And then I think like the second third, I go up and I like sit on the roof for a little while. And then the third, I don't know. I'm like ready to go.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I know. I've like learned all the lessons. Yeah.
Didn't quit whining about your first third.
Ugh. It's almost over.
You're like, oh my, why is life so hard?
It's almost over. Unless I'm gonna die at age like 39, you know, in which case maybe I'm already living in my magic time.
I don't know.
Did he give you any like concrete signs of the future? You don't have to share it if yeah, I don't know.
Like I said, he tries to stay away from predictive language.
Yeah. But was there any like there's potential for
Yeah. He also said, and this is following something I had said to him about my attentions having pivoted from being very single-mindedly about this one career that I was like very like laser focused on,
Mhm.
to suddenly being like, wait a minute, first of all, don't need to choose something.
Mhm.
And I genuinely like it took me until I moved here to realize that I might have like a really successful career and be completely unfulfilled, and like I genuinely didn't think of that.
Mhm.
And that's part of the reason that I like went into yoga and stuff like that, because I'm not interested in leaving anything up to chance in
Yeah.
terms of. So he said it makes sense that there's something about the strength of my. I don't know if it was the fifth house. I'm all confused about the like which houses, but the like career professional house. He said that is actually very prominent for you.
Mhm.
So it makes sense that you speak about your work from like a spiritual place practically.
Mhm.
And it's, what did he say? He was like, I can't say this to everyone, but it is important for you to focus on your work and your career and that kind of thing. Like that actually is for you the right focus.
Mhm.
He said Hollywood was very antithetical to who I am, which I was like, yep.
Yeah.
And he was like, I'm not trying to close a door here saying like that is not where, like there's no room there for you, but you will experience that like spiritual cross like that dissatisfaction or suffering on some level.
Yeah.
Which I know.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many fucking careers that I feel like I could actually have and be pretty miserable.
Mm.
And sometimes when you're just working really hard for anything, to get anything moving, you can kind of like forget that actually you do always need to be discerning. Always.
Yeah.
About what it is you're doing.
Mm.
But he basically was like, you will only spiritually thrive in a workspace in like film and stuff if you are contributing to the culture of the space. So like the kind of content or the like, but basically if I just keep going and doing other people's TV shows and stuff, but that is not going to meet any of my spiritual needs. But my spiritual work is very connected to my that house, the career profession
so
house.
That kind of sounds like if you're gonna like continue on, you need to be taking that prescription in some way, in whatever way that works for you. Yeah.
And I think thinking about yoga and all of this stuff is actually really important.
Yeah.
You know what he said about yoga? He was like, yeah, that sounds like good for now.
For now.
Or something like that. Yeah, and I was like, oh. Okay. What if I end up in a mansion in Malibu on Mountaintop Malibu Mansion?
Is that what you said?
No. Just thinking about trying to cross my profession with my like spiritual work.
That makes absolute sense, though.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and I think like.
So even the way I started to talk about acting, he was like, the way that you are talking about it is very spiritual, and you are right to be. You're in the right house to be getting your like this spiritual work is like does live there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Not in like having children, for example.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't exactly know, but I see you being like incredibly influential to what the work is, like really shaping it. And like, but you don't necessarily need to be the initiator, I don't think. Like, I don't think you need to write a screenplay for yourself.
Yeah, that's not the impression I got.
Yeah. It's more of like a muse category.
He did say that you have an important role to play in culture, which I don't know how to understand that. Like that was one of the other like kind of big statement that I was like, I don't really know what to do with that. But that's the kind of, you know, people are capable of all making all different kinds of impressions, or not, I guess. And he basically was like, your contribution like can change. Which can like change. He also was like, there's a couple of things, interesting things that I'm sure you'll hear whenever you listen. But a couple of things he said that I thought you might find interesting.
Yeah.
One was about manifesting.
Oh my God. Did he explain manifesting thing?
He was like, everybody says that like, oh, all you have to do is like
think it.
Yeah, and you can fucking get anything.
You have to take action.
That's bullshit.
That's what he said. He said you have to take action.
No, that's not what he said.
Aligned action. I don't know, whatever it is. What did he say?
He said that's actually not true, and it depends on where people are in their fucking spiritual paths. But a lot of people have spiritual contracts with poverty in this lifetime, and those people are not going to be manifesting wealth. But he said, just in case you think this is like a bad thing.
Is that why you were like, you need to listen to this?
No, because you've talked about manifesting in general before.
Yeah.
That he just happened to use this example.
Yeah.
And he was saying, and actually people who something about how if exploring wealth is important on your spiritual journey, then you will at some point have to interface with poverty.
Oh, interesting.
So he was like, that's when I say like some people are spiritually contracted for poverty, I don't mean like that's like how it's going to be.
It's like they're going to be poor there,
forever.
but it means they have to go through poverty.
Yeah.
They have to experience poverty.
But he said, whatever, I want to manifest.
Okay. You would a direct or indirect manifestor? This is human design again. Which maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's like, nah, that's not the thing. And that
I don't think he works like any other.
Yeah. In that, there's like
formats.
your conscious self and your subconscious self.
Oh, he said interesting things about dreams as well. We talked about dreams.
I want to hear about that, and then I'll just finish this. So, like, there are some people where like they can consciously manifest, and some people where they can only unconsciously manifest.
Interesting.
And so, if they try to go after a thing, it doesn't happen. It's only like when they kind of lean back.
Interesting.
And then magically it occurs.
Yeah.
What did he say about dreams?
He was like, we were talking about something about this time period that's going on, and a couple of like astrological things happening, and what that might mean for like my daily life. And he was saying something about hopefully being open, it being important to be open and receptive to messages from my like yin land. And he was like, how are you with dreams or something? And I was like, normally I don't remember them very often. I have remembered them more in the past 2 months.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what I said, and he was like, that's perfect. Because he said something about dreams. I just want to tell you the part that is funny. And I was like, he was like, you don't have to remember them.
Oh.
The dream works on the level of the dream.
Yeah.
So you dreaming it is you've done the work. So it doesn't actually mean anything to like analyze your, like if it feels important to do it, great.
I actually totally believe that.
Yeah.
And
because I said something, I was like, that's so funny because I feel like I'm the only motherfucker in here who's not lucid dreaming every fucking second.
That's true.
Yeah. And he was like, all those people. And I was like, what do you mean? He didn't say all those people are lying, but he was like, at best, people have like a fleeting moment of lucidity in dreams. And he said also it wouldn't mean anything if they, which is kind of what I was trying to say when we had that whole conversation standing right there, which is if you're talking about the subconscious plane, like what are the benefits of bringing the conscious tool into the subconscious plane?
Right.
It's like saying I can move my heartbeat into my small intestine. It's like, okay, I don't think it needs that.
Yeah, okay, that doesn't help the small intestine.
Right, like I don't think
dreams aren't like arbitrary things for us to just mess with. They're actually doing something.
And they're already doing what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
You're not like asleep at the wheel because you're not lucid dreaming, which obviously, for whatever reason, I've just been in like one too many conversations about this where I suddenly feel like, why does everyone, because I genuinely do not give a shit about lucid dreaming. I feel like I should. But it's always been to me like, it's like, like why?
I think it's like people wanting to just experience things.
That I
Like
respect
wanting to
and
have like
understand.
control over. Just to them, it kind of seems like a matrix situation where they can just like shape reality, create their own virtual reality in their heads. Which okay, yeah,
Yeah, which sounds cool.
which does sound cool.
I don't know that means you're like doing more work in your dream.
I also don't know. Anyway, this is like a whole. I do wonder. Aren't you dreaming?
Yeah.
That you're lucid dreaming.
Very possibly.
Isn't that something that's going on? And like, how do you think about what you want to dream about? Like, how does that come into your head in this dream state? How is that the thing that you decide to go off and do? And how is that any different than just having a dream about it happening? But yeah, I think like you don't have to remember it at all. You don't have to like integrate it into your life. I think
Yeah.
a dream is like working itself out.
Mhm.
It's like ironing a sheet.
So some of that was pretty comforting. Like the idea that that there isn't like work that I'm not doing.
No, and I actually think like when we take meaning out of it and get really freaked out, like that's the kind of only like negative thing to do. When you like try to get in the way and you're like, oh my god, I had a dream where I killed my father or something. Then you get like really upset about it and you can like spiral. But if you just like contain it within the dream and you trust that it was like telling you something or doing something for you.
Right. There's nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly.
He also said something fascinating about judgment being really the only problem with anything.
Huh.
So that like nothing, which reminded me of my like ongoing paranoia about like pot gummies and like everyone needs, I need to look, everyone needs, I need to watch this. I don't.
Yeah.
Like he was like the thing that's harmful is not whatever the thing is, it's the judgment about it.
Yeah.
Which I was like, makes a lot of sense.
Makes so much sense. It's about everything.
Yes.
Everything.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's like what it's in the writing that I'm like doing for Aditi. It's everywhere, but like, yeah, when he said that, I was like, oh yeah. Basically, like, if I make it something a problem,
Yeah.
but like, I can also just yeah, there were like a lot of really, really interesting things. He said basically about money that essentially that the way that we relate to spirituality and money as being disparate is actually like it's like a historical remnant. It's a thing that the church did.
Yeah.
And so there's no
I can see that.
like there's nothing about wealth that's not spiritual.
There's this book.
There's nothing there's no like binary between the material and the spiritual. And we've gotten those things quite entangled. So he was like, if you want to manifest a bunch of money, like you manifest a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you're not doing the work or whatever.
Talking about dreams. The dream universe gives physical manifestation to your thoughts. Everything has meaning in that realm, and people like to interact with their meaning. Yeah. But sometimes I think we misinterpret things.
For sure.
And I've definitely like gotten myself into knots about like, ugh. I once had a dream about Jerry Seinfeld. It comes up so much.
Mm-hmm.
Or basically we were in love.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I have like a lot of dreams where I fall in love with people and then I wake up and I'm like, what's happening? And it's taken me some time to be like, oh, there's just like something, like love to me feels a certain way. And then I think love to me feels very like caring and nurturing. And then so often I dream about like being in a romantic relationship with people where it's like not necessarily that I'm in love with them or like I want to make out with them. I just feel cared for by some person. Yeah. And it's nice to just like give yourself that in the dream world. I don't know. Not have judgment about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's this really good book all about that, about like money and spirituality, or like I think it's called The Soul of Money.
Mm.
It was one of those books that I remember I was like bookmarking everything. I was like, ooh, ooh. And then I finally forgot it because I've constantly been trying to like undo my money beliefs.
Mm.
But yeah.
Yeah, I thought you'd think that was interesting. Yeah, man, we went all over the place.
That's so great.
And he, for a couple of different reasons, which we can talk about, so it's not actually that fascinating, but he's like not at all surprised that like random creative projects like this are popping up in my head, and basically he's like, whatever it is, like you're right on, and you should do it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like it'll pay dividends. It won't necessarily be in the next month or year. It might take a couple of years to happen, but whatever your like idea, like all of whatever this is that's going on, you're like I mentioned this, and he was like, you're right.
Yeah, your intuition.
Yeah. It is right about that.
Which is also to me a very feminine thing.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think we've had this conversation where I'm like, yeah, but don't you just like really know at the end of the day something? And you're like, I don't know. Because to me, I feel like I know the right answer to everything. Just as long as I like this. And there's not a bunch of other noise, and there's not other like I never feel like the answer's not there.
I know. That's infuriating. Anyway, yeah. Some people are like that.
I know.
You're lucky.
And it's not luck.
No, I know it's not luck, but you're lucky to have that. I don't think everyone has that. And
I'm
it's not that
realizing
they're not
that.
listening.
I'm realizing that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what the inside of other people's psyches feel like.
Yeah.
So I've always been like, like that thing. People are like, yes or no, So it's a little like, it's a certain kind of validating and invalidating, I guess, but like, to be like, your sense, what your felt experience is real, you should listen to it, but also not everyone. Like, not everyone has the ability to. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm backtracking on what I just thought. I don't know if that's true.
Which is true.
But not everyone has it. I'm not sure. Or if it's just really inconvenient.
I've always assumed that it's that. But the implication from the spiritual frameworks that some of these people that I've spoken to come from, there's something like very cyclical. It means everyone's actually not in the same place.
Yeah.
And in a larger sense, everybody is in the same place. So it's not an either or, but I think I have felt like literally frustration and almost anger towards people in the past because I'm like, you know what I'm talking about. And they're like, no, I really don't.
Yeah.
And I have treated it like it's unwillingness, laziness, all kinds of other stuff. But like, maybe they really can't. I don't know. So there's something like actually everyone's in a different place. It's really obvious, obviously, but
It's
I
not
mean,
obvious.
on a deep, deep level, people are in different places.
Yeah.
And it made me think of last night's conversation, the text that I got right before the stream, and like wondering what somebody else's karmic or like soul contract is. Like maybe it feels super right because it's super right.
Yeah.
Maybe he has a soul contract to like have a baby right now.
So it doesn't make sense to you, and to you it's like, oh, you're stepping into fire again.
Yeah, but it might be exactly what I mean. Which it's not that I didn't doubt it on my like heart level again,
Yeah.
because I trust. Like I think he's a good parent. You know what I mean? Like
of course.
I trust his like the like important stuff, but like not always his brain. But it also like he said I was in the category of like could or couldn't, doesn't really make a difference. Like it's not going to confirm or screw up my spiritual path to have a kid. But it's like it's not important for me to. That's kind of how I guess that's how I relate to it. So like, it was interesting to experience like my sister having such a different feeling of like what she's supposed to be doing in this arena. Yeah. You know, I had to be like, okay, I guess it's super important for you to have a biological child.
And it actually is.
I mean, I've always known that it was. Because she also like she's talked about it. Like, and the first time she worked with this guy was before she met Naresh, like so she might even have expressed it to me that way. That like it because so remember how I said in the profession house, like that's where spiritual work of mine is going on.
Yeah.
So for Aditi, I think that one of the places that her spiritual work is like it's a spiritual imperative for her to have had this baby.
Yeah.
It somehow is like intrinsically linked to what she's here to do. And that I really believe. And the fact that he makes so much sense meaning like, just like.
It's right.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh yeah, you.
Yeah.
Of course you.
And, you know, like whatever ups and downs there are, I get and believe that she needed to do it. And I'm sure I will feel that way about Sam as well. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think it's likely. So it's not that I think it's a mistake. It just causes tension in my body. That's it.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
Yeah. It's
I
like
think I just said
that.
his name. Okay.
So bad. What was it he said about like you and your career again? For some reason that makes sense to me too. Like you worry about people because like you can kind of lead the way. You can kind of like show people like it would be really good if you did this. You can like shape something. And so when that is like not what you would do or not like doesn't go with your gut feeling, yeah, it makes sense that you would get like tension in your body.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Especially if I actually, like, on a deep level believe that it's my fucking spiritual work to be pointing
Exactly.
something out, then it's like,
yeah.
It was very validating of what throughout my whole life I think I have been trained to see as sticking my nose in places it doesn't belong, commenting on things like my unsolicited advice. Like I have all these really negative judgments about the way that I.
What was it your friend said? Someone's making a mistake somewhere.
Steph, my boyfriend.
Ugh.
I think someone's making a mistake somewhere.
Right, but that's not a negative thing you do. That's your like
it might
your purpose.
It might be, and of course the like hows and stuff are important to finesse, and I don't think there's any shortcuts. And the other thing that I was talking to my family about is, again, like how much the like positive and the like building and the like, yeah, go right ahead, madam, kind of way that I have been spoken to both by Eric and by this person make me realize that I have been in a lifelong battle with my own belief in myself, because it is not, you're not supposed to be arrogant, which means you're not supposed to think highly of yourself. And again, there are all these, like, it's so easy to cross these fucking wires.
Yeah.
But basically the mechanisms that I've had is that anytime I like either aspire to or like believe in my bones that I have like a bigger purpose, I immediately am like, that is not humble and it's narcissistic. So then it like undercuts itself. And I'm like, right, no, okay. But the feelings are still like continue to be there. I still have, like, I remember trying to spit out to my therapist a few years ago, like, I feel like I'm supposed to do something important. And it was really hard to say.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I sound like I'm really into myself.
It's messed up. I completely understand this and relate to this. I'm like terrified always of trampling on other people, or thinking that I'm really great or whatever. So I'll double down on the other side. And a really kind of new development for me is realizing that like I don't need to go to the opposite extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, like, I can be bigger than I have been. And maybe I will step on some toes and I will apologize and I will be more careful next time. But that doesn't mean that I need to shrink down to the size of a mouse.
No, in fact, you will probably be like in spiritual distress for as long as you do that.
Exactly. And I actually think that like my shrinking is the thing that somehow like bugs people, like that actually spills over onto other people. So it's like you kind of can't get around it. Like you're going to affect other people, and you are going to have like a sense of self. You are going to have an ego. And it's just about what you do with it. And if you use it for good, then it will be for good.
It's so interesting how like when people do that, no one's ever like, who did they think? Who is this Oprah woman think she is?
I do think there's bitterness that people can feel.
Sure,
towards.
but I guess if someone's a dongle, then I'm like, who do you think you are? But if it's someone who is using it for like who I perceive to be using it for good, I'm like, which kind of reminds me about how like I actually think I'd be like totally willing to like raise money if it was for something that I like thought was really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
I would not have a hard time asking people for money. But if it suddenly is like, oh, give me something for something about me, then suddenly I'm like,
yeah, but you're thinking that like it ends with you, and it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. Like whatever you receive will be like put back into the world in like whatever way. I think it has to be. I think that's true for everyone. Everyone. Like it never ends with you. Everyone's just kind of a channel through it where it's passing through. Yeah, and with Oprah, like people are like, no, have more power.
Yeah.
Like, come on. You're running for office, right?
He said he thought I would make a good president. He was like, I don't know if you ever thought. I was like, are you fucking serious right now? There's all kinds of reasons why that's not happening, but he was like, I would vote for you.
I would vote for you. No, I would actually. You would be a great politician. What I mean by that is like I would trust you, and I would trust that you would do things. You would like shake up some. I don't know.
I in the past have like really wished that I was into that. You know, I listened to so much stuff, and I find it fascinating to hear the like Pod Save America dudes discuss policy shit. But I don't have the. This is just like a passing thought, but like, I wish I was into policy. Or like it doesn't, you know. God bless the people
That
They
should be
care about it.
I think you'd be a good mayor. Like maybe something less about policy and more like about like
About what?
I don't know, protecting people.
I'd be a terrifying protector. I believe this runs in alien. So bad.
Oh my god.
And that's another
Starseed.
thing. Yeah, that's another thing that was really quieted, frankly. You know how I'm always like pulling up videos of him and I'm like, how is this normal? And I'm like banging on this thing of like,
Yeah, how does he already know how to do this?
yes. And like, I don't have to do that anymore. Part of me was like, okay, cool.
It's funny that he was like, oh, you have already peaked there. Did he say anything about the rest of your family? I mean, he's worked with your sister, right?
Yeah.
Did he say anything about your parents?
No, he did say that parents are basically there to wound you. And that's kind of like part of their work.
Are we there to wound them too?
Maybe.
Yeah.
But that's not like, it's not malfunction. It's not something going wrong.
I think I've heard that before.
It's like part of the thing.
Gosh. Yeah. I was trying to tell my mom that today in some way.
That it's her duty to warn you.
No, but I was like, you know, I'm okay. And like I've always been okay.
Mhm.
I went through some tough shit, but that's fine. That's not like outside the realm of what life is supposed to look like. So you didn't fail in any capacity. Like it's just that's what it was. And look, it's pretty all right, isn't it? Isn't it? Like I don't know if she can always see that. I think when people get really caught into like an idea of like it's not supposed to be this way, then it means you're like living inside this world that is just wrong. So like everything inside of it is wrong. And that's sometimes
It's making resistance like systemic.
yeah, exactly.
It's like a policy of resistance.
Yeah.
Which resistance is super fucking painful and creates a ton of friction and
And that's also why sometimes why I wanted to backtrack on the like, oh, maybe like intuition does exist in everyone. I think kind of because I like grew up in a like it's not supposed to be this way environment.
Mhm.
I've kind of always felt like I'm not on the right path,
Mhm.
right? Like those two get mixed up.
Mhm.
And so like I have gut feelings about that. And I think also sometimes I have like intuition feelings about like not having to live like in not in poverty, but in lack. That's actually my destiny. And anything that strives for more is wrong. So it's like how do you know like if it's intuition? I'm asking you because you're the authority.
You know what's cool is that I probably know the answer.
Yeah, right? Okay. How do you know like when it's intuition and when it's just like whatever bone you've been biting for decades?
And again, because everyone's different, like I genuinely don't know.
Right. Yeah.
It feels obvious to me, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you any steps to what. I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I want to say is like that they just feel different. You know what I mean? Like I want to say stuff, but like if that were true, then you would maybe have more clarity about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe you do, and maybe you will, and none of that to say that you don't, but in general though, I think historically, and this isn't like a new concept at all, but I think that if your trust in yourself is fractured,
Mhm.
then
Right.
like of course you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Or of course you can't differentiate between one and the other, because even if you can differentiate, you don't believe it.
Yeah.
So I think that whole thing about instinct will fix itself as you find more occasion to like trust that you know what you're doing.
Yeah. It's probably true.
Which again, like these things are really good reminders for stuff like this. Like I wrote to him being like, I just want to know that I'm on the right road. And he was like, I'm all right, boss.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. You're right. I probably like gun to my head would have said the same. It's fine.
No wonder you haven't really done anything all day. That is a lot.
I'm super tired.
Yeah.
I literally have not taken even 100 steps. And I thought maybe I'll go for a walk before the reading. Then I didn't.
Oh, she walked to the living room instead.
Yeah, I came to the kitchen once.
Is this new, by the way? I keep looking at it.
today?
Ugh. Okay.
They got real cheap, these things, while I
Did
wasn't paying
they?
attention. Yep. I paid kind of a bit for my Fitbit a few years ago. Then that bloody thing conked out. I wanted to like count steps while we're in quarantine.
It's too depressing.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I just feel like the likelihood of me being terrifyingly sedentary is higher now, so I'd rather have something to be like, hey, why don't you just walk around the house? Or
Yeah, that's
literally
not a
just
bad
move.
idea. Just like a reminder, like you've been sitting a while.
Yeah, they're pretty cheap.
Never had one. I used to do that on my phone.
You know, Ray used to call me Fitbit
Did
for
he?
years. Yeah,
That's
that was my,
so
like, that was my
cute.
name. My sister still sometimes
That's
does.
so fitting. Fitting. Anyway. Fitbit. Ah, I love it.
I feel warmly towards it too.
Yes.
Nice when people's stupid shit makes you feel seen. Like it's so funny to me that like Stefan making abject fun of like things that I could be so insecure about actually made me so.
Yeah. He gets you.
Yeah.
I think that's all people want. They just want someone who understands them.
That's partly why I have the thing about like I need somebody to laugh at my jokes.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the thing that's like, wait, is this, do you understand what's happening? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do you understand like what goes on in my brain? Like what I find funny?
Yeah, I think you should do it.
Really?
What did we read? We read about that, yeah.
Yeah, we read a lot.
What all does it say?
Casey Harrington. Thank you for all the comments, Casey.
Thanks, Casey.
If you're having trouble feeling arrogant, frame it as something that's important. You're not doing yet that you should instead of trying to be important in yourself. That's really good.
Did you? I don't know if I followed it.
So it's like if you're having trouble feeling arrogant, frame it as something that's important that you're not doing yet. That you should. Should is like a hard word. But if you're like, I think I'm supposed to be doing something important with my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like you're not being arrogant and fulfilling in that. Yeah.
The whole narcissism thing is really hard.
I think it's harder for women. Overall.
He said something about the divine masculine, and I like almost burst out laughing. It was like, I know there's not a lot around right now.
Divine masculine. Could he point to any?
I mean, not really. Hmm. Almost like something.
Mm.
I don't know.
We read. We read?
Denisov.
Right. Oh yeah, okay. So the cudgel. There's a cudgel over the French.
Yeah, it was not a metaphor.
Yeah. It's a partisan warfare. And there's all these little groups that have like branched off and are attacking the French.
Guerrilla groups that are doing their own thing and waging many little battles.
Yeah. So one of them is Denisov's group. And he and Dolokhov are working together.
When we were reading yesterday, I was like, do they know each other?
Yeah, I can't remember. They must. Yeah.
Rostov.
Mhm.
Rostov is the link, isn't it? Isn't he?
If they are friends.
Yeah, Nicholas knew both of them. Obviously, he was best friends with Denisov.
That's right. Okay.
And then he had that, like, whole brief period with Dolokhov.
Yeah. Three amigos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess they know each other then. And Petya, the youngest Rostov, came to Denisov and then got to like hang out with the cool kids.
He's such a little Natasha.
He's so sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he gave all his raisins to all the men.
He was like, oh yes, I've got raisins.
He has a sweet tooth. Ugh. He gave raisins, and what else did he give? He gave like just whatever random things he had. And then there was a drummer boy that they had captured, and he was quite concerned about the drummer boy.
French kid, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I liked yesterday's reading.
You did?
Yeah, it was very, yeah.
The shit is my
It
book.
was very Robin Hood and his merry men.
It was. That's a good call.
Yeah.
What the hell have I done with my book?
Oh.
Anything else to read? Yeah.
You didn't have it? Okay. Is there anything else to recap? Oh, we met a Tikin Cherabati.
Sherbati, yeah.
Cherabati. Who's very droll.
Yeah. Droll is the most unfitting word for what it means. It sounds like droll.
Droll, yeah.
It sounds like lame.
Droll.
Boring.
So now we are at book 14, chapter 8. Yeah, I don't know how many chapters.
What did you say?
What?
What did you just say?
I don't know.
Something through it?
Yeah,
Whatting through it, did you say?
maybe.
Whatting through it? You said something through it. At the same exact second that I was saying burning through it, so I didn't quite hear. It's not a very similar.
I know. I don't know if I started to say burning and then I was like, stop copying her.
No,
And
it
I
was in the
switched
same
words.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in tune.
There's not a lot of chapters in there. I'm starting to get nervous about finishing this book.
Why nervy?
What happens? What happens after?
We'll figure it out.
By the way, I was texting a guy on Hinge.
Mm-hmm.
He says he's read it twice.
Wow.
So people do read this book.
Well, so far 3.
Book 14, Chapter 8. The arrival of Dolokhov diverted Petya's attention from the drummer boy, to whom Denisov had had some mutton and vodka given, and whom he had had dressed in a Russian coat so that he might be kept with their band and not sent away with the other prisoners. Petya had heard in the army many stories of Dolokhov's extraordinary bravery and of his cruelty to the French. So from the moment he entered the hut, Petya did not take his eyes from him, but braced himself up more and more and held his head high, that he might not be unworthy even of such company.
Dolokhov's appearance amazed Petya by its simplicity.
Denisov wore a Cossack coat, had a beard, had an icon of Nicholas the Wonder Worker on his breast, and his way of speaking and everything he did indicated his unusual position. But Dolokhov, who in Moscow had worn a Persian costume, had now the appearance of a most correct officer of guards. He was clean-shaven and wore a guardsman's padded coat with an Order of St. George at his buttonhole and a plain forage cap set straight on his head. He took off his wet felt cloak in a corner of the room and, without greeting anyone, went up to Denisov and began questioning him about the matter in hand. Denisov told him of the designs the large detachments had on the transport, of the message Petya had brought, and his own replies to both generals. Then he told him all he knew of the French detachment.
That is so, but we must know what troops they are and their numbers, said Dolokhov. It will be necessary to go there. We can't start the affair without knowing for certain how many there are. I like to work accurately. Here now, wouldn't one of these gentlemen like to ride over to the French camp with me? I have brought a spare uniform.
I'll go with you.
Whoa, I think you're having a stroke.
Cried Petya.
I'll
go with you. Yeah, I'm sure that's how he said it.
There's no need for you to go at all, said Denisov, addressing Dolokhov.
Oh.
And as for him, I won't let him go on any account.
I like that, exclaimed Petya. Why shouldn't I go?
Because it's useless?
Well, you must excuse me because I shall go, and that's all. You'll take me, won't you? He said, turning to Dolokhov.
Why not? Dolokhov answered absently, scrutinizing the face of the French drummer boy. Have you had that youngster with you long? He asked Denisov.
He was taken today, but he knows nothing. I'm keeping him with me.
Yes, and where do you put the others? Inquired Dolokhov.
Where? I send them away and take a seat for them, shouted Denisov, suddenly flushing. And I say boldly that I have not a single man's life on my conscience.
Wow.
Would it be difficult for you to send 30 or 300 men to town under escort instead of staining, I speak bluntly, staining the honor of a soldier?
That kind of amiable talk would be suitable from this young count of 16, said Dolokhov with, I guess he's 16.
Okay.
Said Dolokhov with cold irony, but it's time for you to drop it.
Well, I have not said anything. I only say that I'll certainly go with you, said Petya shyly.
But for you and me, old fellow, it's time to drop these amenities, continued Dolokhov, as if he found particular pleasure in speaking of this subject, which irritated himself. Now, why have you kept this lad? He went on, swaying his head. Because you are sorry for him? Don't we know those receipts of yours? You sent 100 men away, and 30 get there. The rest either starve or get killed. So isn't it all the same not to send them?
Esau, screwing up his light-colored eyes, nodded approvingly.
That's not the point. I'm not going to discuss the matter. I do not wish to take it on my conscience. You say they'll die? All right. Only not by my fault.
Dolokhov began laughing.
Who has told them not to capture me these 20 times over? But if they did catch me, they'd string me up to an aspen tree, and with all your chivalry just the same, he paused. However, we must get to work. Tell the Cossack to fetch my kit. I have 2 French uniforms in it. Well, you coming with me? He asked Petya.
Yes, certainly, cried Petya, blushing almost to tears.
Oh my God.
Glancing at Denisov.
While Dolokhov had been disputing with Denisov what should be done with prisoners, Petya had once more felt awkward and restless. But again, he had no time to grasp fully what they were talking about. Grown-up, distinguished men think so. It must be necessary and right, thought he. But above all, Denisov must not dare to imagine that I'll obey him and that he can order me about. I will certainly go to the French camp with Dolokhov. If he can, so can I.
And to all Denisov's persuasions, Petya replied that he too was accustomed to do everything accurately, and not just anyhow, and that he never considered personal danger.
But you'll admit that if we don't know for sure how many of them there are, hundreds of lives may depend on it, while there are only two of us. Besides, I want to go very much and certainly will go, so don't hinder me, said he. It will only make things worse.
Chapter 9. Having
Who's
put
even talking to us? Anyone listening to this?
Yeah. I like how little Dolokhov cares.
Yeah.
He's like, fine, come.
Come. I just need a body for the suit.
Like, pretty much.
Chapter 9.
Having put on French-glued coats and shakos, Petya and Dolokhov rode to the clearing from which Denisov had reconnoitered the French camp. And emerging from the forest in pitch darkness, they descended into the hollow. On reaching the bottom, Dolokhov told the Cossacks accompanying him to await him there, and rode on at a quick trot along the road to the bridge. Petya, his heart in his mouth, with excitement, rode by his side.
If we're caught, I won't be taken alive. I have a pistol, whispered he.
Don't talk Russian, said Dolokhov in a hurried whisper, and at that very moment they heard through the darkness the challenge, Qui vive? And the click of a musket.
The blood rushed to Petya's face and he grasped his pistol.
Lancier du 6e, replied Dolokhov, neither hastening nor snackling his horse's pace.
The black figure of a sentinel stood on the bridge.
Mot d'ordre.
Dolokhov reined in his horse and advanced at a walk.
Dis donc, le colonel Gerard est ici? He asked.
Mot d'ordre, repeated the sentinel, barring the way and not replying.
Oh, no, wait. Oh, okay. Quand un officier fait sa ronde, les sentinelles ne demandent pas le mot d'ordre, cried Dolokhov, suddenly flaring up and riding straight at the sentinel. Je vous demande si le colonel est ici.
And without waiting for an answer from the sentinel, who had stepped aside, Dolokhov rode up the incline at a walk.
Noticing the black outline of a man crossing the road, Dolokhov stopped him and inquired where the commander and officers were. The man, a soldier with a sack over his shoulder, stopped, came close up to Dolokhov's horse, touched it with his hand, and explained simply and in a friendly way that the commander and the officers were higher up the hill to the right in the courtyard of the farm, as he called the landowner's house.
Having ridden up the road, on both sides of which French talk could be heard round the campfires, Dolokhov turned into the courtyard of the landowner's house. Having ridden in, he dismounted and approached a big blazing campfire around which sat several men talking noisily. Something was boiling in a small cauldron, at the edge of the fire, and a soldier in a peaked cap and blue overcoat, lit up by the fire, was kneeling beside it, stirring its contents with a ramrod.
Oh, he's a hard nut to crack, said one of the officers who was sitting in the shadow at the other side of the fire.
He'll make them get a move on those fellows, said another, laughing.
Both fell silent, peering out through the darkness at the sound of Dolokhov's and Petya's steps as they advanced to the fire leading their horses.
Bonjour, messieurs, said Dolokhov loudly and clearly.
There was a stir among the officers in the shadow beyond the fire, and one tall, long-necked officer walking around the fire came up to Dolokhov.
Is that you, Clement? I think not.
Clement!
Is that you, Clement?
Maybe he does have like a different...
A spire? That would be a dark horse. Dolokhov's a dark horse, so maybe.
I'm still in love with him.
I was going to ask you, I will ask you one more time, have your feelings remained the same? No, they're quite the opposite.
He still looks like, what's his face to me?
I don't know why. Like who?
Like Logan.
Who's Logan?
He's the guy in The Good Wife, the blonde guy in The Good Wife.
He does?
That's what he looks like in my head. I don't know why.
Interesting.
Did you get to meet him?
Yeah, but I didn't work with him. Matt something.
Yeah.
Is that you, Clement? He asked. Where the devil? But noticing his mistake, he broke off short and with a frown greeted Dolokhov as a stranger, asking what he could do for him.
Dolokhov said that he and his companions were trying to overtake their regiment, and addressing the company in general, asked whether they knew anything of the 6th Regiment. None of them knew anything, and Petya thought the officers were beginning to look at him and Dolokhov with hostility and suspicion. For some seconds, all were silent.
If you were counting on the evening soup, you've come too late, said a voice from behind the fire with a repressed laugh.
Dolokhov replied that they were not hungry and might push on farther that night.
He handed the horses over to the soldier who was stirring the pot and squatted down on his heels by the fire, beside the officer with the long neck. That officer did not take his eyes from Dolokhov and again asked to what regiment he belonged. Dolokhov, as if he had not heard the question, did not reply, but lighting a short French pipe which he took from his pocket, began asking the officer in how far the road before them was safe from Cossacks.
Those brigands are everywhere, replied an officer from behind the fire.
Dolokhov remarked that the Cossacks were a danger only to stragglers such as his companion and himself, but probably they would not dare to attack large detachments, he added inquiringly. No one replied.
Well, now he'll come away, Petya thought every moment as he stood by the campfire listening to the talk.
But Dolokhov restarted the conversation, which had dropped, and began putting direct questions as to how many men there were in the battalion, how many battalions, and how many prisoners. Asking about the Russian prisoners with that detachment, Dolokhov said,
A horrid business dragging these corpses about with one. It would be better to shoot such rabble, and burst into loud laughter. So strange that Petya thought the French would immediately detect their disguise. Wait, what? And involuntarily took a step back from the campfire.
Subtle. No one replied a word to Dolokhov's laughter, and a French officer
So
whom they could not see, he lay wrapped in a greatcoat, rose and whispered something to a companion. Dolokhov got up and called to the soldier who was holding their horses.
Will they bring our horses or not? Thought Petya, instinctively drawing nearer to Dolokhov.
The horses will row.
Good evening, gentlemen, said Dolokhov.
Petya wished to say good night, but could not utter a word. The officers were whispering together. Dolokhov was a long time mounting his horse, which would not stand still. Then he rode out of the yard at a foot pace. Petya rode beside him, longing to look around to see whether or not the French were running after them, but not daring to.
Coming out onto the road, Dolokhov did not ride back across the open country, but through the village. At one spot, he stopped and listened. Do you hear? He asked. Petya recognized the sound of Russian voices and saw the dark figures of Russian prisoners round their campfires. When they had descended to the bridge, Petya and Dolokhov rode past the sentinel, who, without saying a word, paced morosely up and down it. Then they descended into the hollow where the Cossacks awaited them.
Well, now, goodbye. Tell Denisov at the first shot at daybreak, said Dolokhov, and was about to ride away, but Petya seized hold of him.
Really? He cried. You are such a hero. Oh, how fine, how splendid, how I love you. What? You remember Petya with the Emperor?
Oh, yeah. What?
Be cool, Petya.
Oh, I'm fine. All right, said Dolokhov. But Petya did not let go of him, and Dolokhov saw through the gloom that Petya was bending toward him and wanted to kiss him.
Oh.
Dolokhov kissed him, laughed, turned his horse, and vanished into the darkness. Oh my God.
Oh, fine.
Oh, how splendid! Oh, how I love you! Oh my gosh. It's also funny when they say really, exclamation point.
Really? Like that?
Really? Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's no comma, it's just like, it's its own thing.
Yeah, is that? Do people do that in English? Does anyone do that? Really? It's more sarcastic.
I could see it like, if I was like, I only walked 20 steps today, and you were like, no, you didn't. I'd be like, really? I did.
Would you start a sentence like, really? I only walked 10 steps today.
I might do if I was saying I only walked 10 steps today and you gave me some kind of feedback that gave me the impression that you didn't believe it.
Okay.
Then I'd be like, really? I really did. It was fine. It's splendid.
Vraiment.
Okay. This is chapter 20, as Ishan for some reason says.
No.
Keep being like, can someone stop and tell him it's not 20?
That's cute.
20.
20 seems much harder to say than 10.
Oh, he doesn't like things easy.
Oh, okay.
I made the mistake of telling him to count to 10 because I had to do a tricep push-up and stay at the bottom for 10 seconds.
Okay.
I was like, okay, ready, count to 10. And he was like, 1, 2, 3. And I was like, go faster!
That's kind of ingenious. Having returned to the watchman's hut, Petya found Denisov in the passage. He was awaiting Petya's return in a state of agitation, anxiety, and self-reproach for having let him go.
Thank God, he exclaimed. Yes, thank God, he repeated, listening to Petya's rapturous account. But devil take you, I haven't slept because of you. Well, thank God. Now lie down. We can still get a nap before morning.
No, said Petya. I don't want to sleep yet.
I could have danced all
It
night.
really is that. I mean, it would be very exciting. Besides, I know myself. If I fall asleep, it's finished. And then I'm used to not sleeping before a battle. Oh, yes, I'm sure you're very used to before a battle.
I'm accustomed to it. He sat a while in the hut, joyfully recalling the details of his expedition and vividly picturing to himself what would happen next day.
Then, noticing that Denisov was asleep, he rose and went out of doors.
It was still quite dark outside. The rain was over, but drops were still falling from the trees. Near the watchman's hut, the black shapes of the Cossacks' shanties and of horses, shapes of the what? The black shapes of the Cossacks' shanties and of horses tethered together could be seen. Behind the hut, the dark shapes of the 2 wagons with their horses beside them were discernible. And in the hollow of the dying campfire gleamed red. Not all the Cossacks and Hussars were asleep. Here and there, amid the sounds of falling drops and the munching of the horses nearby, could be heard low voices which seemed to be whispering.
You know how in school you have to learn, like, what is the subject?
Yes.
Did you ever have to do that? I feel like this would be such good exercise for all those kids.
You know, you're like not supposed to end a sentence with a preposition or something.
Yeah.
That's like crazy talk. Did you ever see The Last Man on Earth or something?
No.
I think I saw one or two.
Hater? Like, no. What? No, I just combined 2 people.
You're on very formal.
William Hader.
Formal first name basis. Maybe his name's William. No, it's not Bill Hader.
No, it's not Bill Hader. It's
because there's a character who's like, I've only seen a couple of episodes, but he like ends up stuck with this woman because he's the last. Like there's no one else there.
Yeah.
And the woman he gets stuck with is like a grammar Nazi, but she's like a next level grammar Nazi, and doesn't. Not grandma.
Oh.
Grammar.
Oh. I thought she was like, you know, nice grandma, but she's a Nazi.
Played by that strange lady, Kirsten Shaw.
Oh no, I hate her.
You do?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, her character is a grandma Nazi, and it's quite funny.
Right?
Because it sounds so bizarre. Like, he's like, it's not what I'm talking about. And she's like, I think you mean, that is not of which I speak. It's really formal, and you're like, wait, is that really how English works?
That's how it's supposed to work. We're all breaking it. Stop breaking it. Petya came out, peered into the darkness, and went up to the wagons. Someone was snoring under them, and around them stood saddled horses munching their oats. In the dark, Petya recognized his own horse, which he called Karabakh, though it was of Ukrainian breed, and went up to it.
Well, Karabakh, we'll do some service tomorrow, said he, sniffing its nostrils and kissing it.
Sniffing its nostrils. Why aren't you asleep, sir? Said a Cossack who was sitting under a wagon.
No, Likachev, isn't that your name? Do you know I've only just come back? We've been to the French camp.
And Petya gave the Cossack a detailed account not only of his ride, but also of his object, and why he considered it better to risk his life than to act just anyhow.
Well, you should get some sleep now, said the Cossack.
No, I am used to this, said Petya. I say, aren't the flints in your pistols worn out? I brought some with me. Don't you want any? You can have some.
The Cossack bent forward from under the wagon to get a closer look at Petya.
Because I am accustomed to doing everything accurately, said Petya, some fellows do things just anyhow, without preparation, and then they're sorry for it afterwards. I don't like that.
Just so, said the Cossack.
Oh, yes, another thing, please, my dear fellow, will you sharpen my saber for me? It's got... Petya feared to tell a lie, and the saber never had been sharpened. Can you do it?
Of course I can.
Likichev got up, rummaged in his pack, and soon Petya heard the warlike sound of steel on wet stone. He climbed onto the wagon and sat on its edge. The Cossack was sharpening the saber under the wagon.
I see. What a land of sleep, must Petya.
Some are and some aren't, like us.
Well, and the boy?
Bethany? Oh, he's thrown himself down there in the passage, fast asleep after his fright. He was that glad.
After that, Petya remained silent for a long time, listening to the sounds. He heard footsteps in the darkness, and a black figure appeared.
What are you sharpening? Asked a man coming up to the wagon.
Why, this gentleman's saber.
That's right, said the man, whom Petya took to be an Azar. Was the cup left here?
There, by the wheel.
The Azar took the cup.
Must be daylight soon, said he, yawning, and went away.
Petya ought to have known that he was in a forest with Denisov's guerrilla band, less than a mile from the road, sitting on a wagon captured from the French, beside which horses were tethered, that under it Likichev was sitting, sharpening a saber for him. The big dark blotch to the right was the watchman's hut, and the red blotch below to the left was the dying embers of a campfire. That the man who had come for the cup was an Azar who wanted a drink, but he neither knew nor waited to know anything of all this. He was in a fairy kingdom, where nothing resembled reality. The big dark blotch might really be the watchman's hut, or it might be a cavern leading to the very depths of the earth. Perhaps the red spot was a fire, or it might be the eye of an enormous monster. Perhaps he was really sitting on a wagon, but it might very well be that he was not sitting on a wagon, but on a terribly high tower from which, if he fell, he would have to fall for a whole day, or a whole month, or go on falling and never reach the bottom. Perhaps it was just the Cossack Likichev who was sitting under the wagon, but it might be the kindest, bravest, most wonderful, most splendid man in the world whom no one knew of. It might really have been that the Azar came for water and went back into the hollow, but perhaps he had simply vanished, disappeared altogether, and dissolved into nothingness.
Nothing Petya could have seen now would have surprised him. He was in a fairy kingdom where everything was possible.
He looked up at the sky, and the sky was a fairy realm like the earth. It was clearing, and over the tops of the trees, clouds were swiftly sailing as if unveiling the stars. Sometimes it looked as if the clouds were passing, and a clear black sky appeared. Sometimes it seemed as if the black spaces were clouds. Sometimes the sky seemed to be rising high, high overhead, and then it seemed to sink so low that one could touch it with one's hand.
Petya's eyes began to close, and he swayed a little.
The trees were dripping. Quiet talking was heard. The horses neighed and jostled one another. Someone snored.
What? Kiss to the saber. That's right, hissing sound.
Oh, wait. Ah!
That's good.
Hissed the saber against the whetstone. And
Not your first time with a whetstone.
I love a good whetstone.
Wish I had one actually. Yeah, good sharpen. I love a sharp knife too.
I used to do that, like sharpening his knives, because he used to work in a kitchen. And there's something sexy about working in a kitchen.
Mhm.
And so he was like really fast with sharpening knives. Then he heard an harmonious orchestra playing some unknown, sweetly solemn hymn. Petya was as musical as Natasha had more so. Petya was.
And more so.
Oh, thank you. Was as musical as Natasha and more so than Nicholas, but had never learned music or thought about it, and so the melody that unexpectedly came to his mind seemed to him particularly fresh and attractive. The music became more and more audible. The melody grew and passed from one instrument to another. And what was played was a fugue though Petya had not the least conception of what a fugue is. Each instrument, now resembling a violin and now a horn, better and clearer than violin or horn, played its own part, and before it had finished, the melody merged with another instrument that began almost the same air, and then with a third and a fourth, and they all blended into one, and again became separate, and again blended, now into solemn church music, now into something dazzlingly brilliant and triumphant.
Sorry, he's like Beethoven?
I guess so. You
Okay.
never knew.
Oh, why, that was in a dream, Petya said to himself as he lurched forward. It's in my ears, but perhaps it's... Literally, I've had these exact thoughts. But perhaps it's music of my own. Well, go on, my music. No! No, seriously, in all seriousness,
Yeah.
only one thing. I've had twice in a dream,
Mm.
have been listening engagedly to something and been like, this is good. I need to like hold on to it.
Wow.
And then when I wake up and I'm like, wait, I guess I didn't know it in the dream. I wonder if I made it up or if it was like something that I trapped from waking life and just never I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have several times remembered so much about what I'm listening to without being able to actually like grab it that I'm like, what if my subconscious wrote
You did.
that? That's crazy.
I've
What have
definitely had dreams where I woke up. I don't know if I've had dreams about music. Sorry, I cut you off.
No.
But where I've woken up and I've been like, why can't I write consciously like that? Like that was a fantastic adventure that I just went through.
So why don't you write it?
I can't. I can't remember it all. Like I don't really
It's okay.
remember all my dreams. Yeah.
But can't you like fill stuff in? Might not
I
be like the
guess so.
perfect replica of what you dreamt, but
Waking life. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know why I've never tried to do that.
yeah, it's not like it's cheating.
I don't think I've ever even thought about it. That's so weird.
That is weird if you wake up and have the thought like, why can't I write like this?
Yeah, because I'm always like, so much happened. So exciting, and the scope of it was so large. And yeah, like to me, because I have this thing where I've always been like, oh, I can't write story, and then I have these dreams, and I'm like, what am I talking about? Like, I obviously have a capacity for story. Yeah.
No brainer.
Okay.
No brainer.
He closed his eyes, and from all sides, as if from a distance, sounds fluttered, grew into harmony, separated, blended, and again all mingled into the same sweet and solemn hymn. Oh, this is delightful, as much as I like, and as I like, said Petya to himself.
How fucking weird. He's tripping. He just realized he can hear music in his head and make it do whatever he wants.
Yeah. He tried to conduct that enormous orchestra.
Now softly die away. And the sounds obeyed him. Now fuller, more joyful, still more, and more joyful. And from an unknown depth rose increasingly triumphant sounds. No voices! This is so weird. What's
It's like
happening?
Mickey Mouse.
It is.
Yeah.
Now voices join in, ordered Petya, and at first from afar he heard men's voices, or maybe he's dreaming, and then women's. The voices grew in harmonious, triumphant strength, and Petya listened to their surpassing beauty in awe and joy.
With a solemn, triumphal march, there mingled a song, the drip from the trees, and the hissing of the saber. Oh, shake, shake, shake. And again, the horses jostled one another and neighed, not disturbing the choir, but joining in it.
Petya did not know how long this lasted. He enjoyed himself all the time, wondered at his enjoyment, and regretted that there was no one to share it. He was awakened by Likachev's kindly voice.
It's ready, Your Honor. You can split a Frenchman in half with it.
Petya woke up. That fully happens to me. What happens if you go to it.
Yeah. It's getting light. It's really getting light, he exclaimed.
The horses that had previously been invisible could now be seen to their very tails, and a watery light showed itself through the bare branches. Petya shook himself, jumped up, took a ruble from his pocket, and gave it to Likachev. Then he flourished the saber, tested it, and sheathed it. The Cossacks were untying their horses and tightening their saddle girths.
And here's the commander, said Likachev.
Denisov came out of the watchman's hut and, having called Petya, gave orders to get ready.
Okay.
He's really cute, but I am feeling anxious with this merry band in the forest.
That something's gonna go wrong.
I don't know. I just feel like, why are we wasting? I feel like we're wasting time. You know what it feels like?
Yeah.
It feels like this is first act scenes in like the ninth act.
It is feeling again like we've been transported to a different book.
Mm-hmm. Like we're 80-something% of the way through, and people are like, "Ooh, adventure in the forest!" Like so strange. Like the proximity to danger doesn't seem that great. I don't know. It's weird.
But maybe there's something to that. Like, so we're 87% through. We've been at this a while, but Petya hasn't.
Yeah. I don't know. For whatever reason, I'm not liking it that much. Maybe it's because of that.
Yeah, I guess
Then
now.
I'm like, no, we need to be.
Now I'm always like, oh yeah, if I feel unsettled, because I'm like, there's a reason for that,
Mhm.
and I feel it too. Where are we? Why are we saying? Why is it so hopeful right now?
Yeah, it's the like yes, it feels a little like I want to be like ramping up to a dramatic something. 80-something%. Like, isn't this when that happens?
Yeah.
And maybe it will, but yeah, it just feels very like a chill hanging out in the forest and someone just had a dream where they're a composer.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Chapter 11.
Yes. The men rapidly picked out their horses in the semi-darkness, tightened their saddle girths, I really don't like that word, and formed companies. Denisov stood by the watchman's hut giving final orders. The infantry of the detachment passed along the road and quickly disappeared amid the trees in the mist of early dawn, hundreds of feet splashing through the mud. The Esau gave some orders to his men. Petya held his horse by the bridle, impatiently awaiting the order to mount. His face, having been bathed in cold water, was all aglow, gasping, and his eyes were particularly brilliant. Cold shivers ran down his spine and his whole body pulsed.
Well, is everything ready? Asked Denisov. Bring the horses.
The horses were bored. Denisov was angry with the Cossack because the saddle girths, okay, again.
You hate it.
I don't know, but we've said it 3 times in the last 1.5 minutes. Were too slack, reproved him, and mounted. Petya put his foot in the stirrup, 'cause it makes me think of penis widths.
Oh, okay.
And not in like a
girthy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't like the word girth.
Girth. It's almost a, what's it called? Onomatopoeia? Is that what it's called?
Is it? That is what it's called.
Yeah, okay. Almost.
Like buzzing.
Girth. Yeah. Doesn't
In
it
what
sound
way is it
like,
onomatopoetic?
don't you feel like your mouth has to take on a girthy shape?
I don't.
I'm going to stop saying it. Okay.
Petya put his foot in the stirrup. His horse, by habit, made as if to nip his leg, but Petya leaped quickly into the saddle, unconscious of his own weight, and turning to look at the hussars starting in the darkness behind him, rode up to Denisov.
Vasily Dmitrievich, entrust me with some commission, please, for God's sake, said he.
Denisov seemed to have forgotten Petya's very existence. He turned to glance at him.
I ask one thing of you, he said sternly, to obey me and not shove yourself forward anywhere.
He did not say another word to Petya, but rode in silence all the way. When they had come to the edge of the forest, it was noticeably growing light over the field. Denisov talked in whispers with the Esau, and the Cossacks rode past Petya and Denisov. When they had all ridden by, Denisov touched his horse and rode down the hill. Slipping into their haunches and sliding, the horses descended with their riders into the ravine. Petya rode beside Denisov, the pulsation of his body constantly increasing. It was getting lighter and lighter, but the mist still hid distant objects. Having reached the valley, Denisov looked back and nodded to a Cossack beside him.
Signal, said he.
The Cossack raised his arm and a shot rang out. In an instant, the tramp of horses galloping forward was heard. Shouts came from various sides, and then more shots.
At the first sound of trampling hoofs and shouting, Petya lashed his horse and, loosening his rein, galloped forward, not heeding Denisov, who shouted at him.
Fuck, Petya.
Ooh, it seemed to Petya that at the moment the shot was fired, it suddenly became as bright as noon. He galloped to the bridge. Cossacks were galloping along the road in front of him. On the bridge, he collided with a Cossack who had fallen behind, but he galloped on. In front of him, soldiers, probably Frenchmen, were running from right to left across the road. One of them fell in the mud under his horse's feet.
Cossacks were crowding about a hut, busy with something. From the midst of that crowd, terrible screams arose. Petya galloped up, and the first thing he saw was the pale face and trembling jaw of a Frenchman, clutching the handle of a lance that had been aimed at him.
"Hurrah, lads! Arms!" shouted Petya, and giving rein to his excited horse, he galloped forward along the village street.
I want to punch him in the head.
I really hope he's all right.
Why would you think he was going to be with this fucking behavior?
Yeah.
He could hear shooting ahead of him. Cossacks, hussars, and ragged Russian prisoners who had come running from both sides of the road were shouting something loudly and incoherently. A gallant-looking Frenchman in a blue overcoat, capless and with a frowning red face, had been defending himself against the hussars. When Petya galloped up, the Frenchman had already fallen. Too late again flashed through Petya's mind, and he galloped on to the place from which the rapid firing could be heard. The shots came from the yard of the landowner's house he had visited the night before with Dolokhov. The French were making a stand there behind a wattle fence in a garden thickly overgrown with bushes and were firing at the Cossacks who crowded at the gateway. Through the smoke, as he approached the gate, Petya saw Dolokhov, whose face was of a pale greenish tint, shouting to his men. "Go round! Wait for the infantry!" he exclaimed as Petya rode up to him.
"Wait? Hurrah!" shouted Petya, and without pausing a moment, galloped to the place whence came the sounds of firing and where the smoke was
I'm
thickest.
so annoyed right now. A volley was heard, and some bullets whistled past, while others flashed.
You know, it's like wait, what was the thing?
Yeah.
Besmirched.
Smushed,
Yeah, smirched, other
while others
flashed.
plashed against something. The Cossacks and
You might
Dolokhov
be
galloped.
able to-
Can you show? The Cossacks and Dolokhov galloped after Petya into the gateway of the courtyard. In the dense, wavering smoke, some of the French threw down their arms and ran out of the bushes to meet the Cossacks, while others ran down the hill toward the pond. Petya was galloping along the courtyard, but instead of holding the reins, he waved both his arms about rapidly and strangely, slipping farther and farther to one side of his saddle. His horse, having galloped up to a campfire that was smoldering in the morning light, stopped suddenly, and Petya fell heavily onto the wet ground. The Cossacks saw that his arms and legs jerked rapidly, though his head was quite motionless.
Flash is a word.
Well, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I'm so angry right now. Why did he have to do that?
I don't know, 16-year-old boys are stupid.
A bullet had pierced his skull, is the end of the fucking paragraph.
After speaking to the senior French officer who came out of the house with a white handkerchief tied to his sword and announced that they surrendered, Dolokhov dismounted and went up to Petya, who lay motionless with outstretched arms.
Downfall, he said with a frown, and went to the gate to meet Denisov, who was riding towards him.
"Killed?" cried Denisov, recognizing from a distance the unmistakably lifeless attitude, very familiar to him, in which Petya's body was lying.
Downfall, repeated Dolokhov, as if the utterance of these words afforded him pleasure, and he went quickly up to the prisoners, who were surrounded by Cossacks who had hurried up. "We won't take them," he called out to Denisov.
Denisov did not reply. He rode up to Petya, dismounted, and with trembling hands turned toward himself the blood-stained, mud-bespattered face, which had already gone white.
"I'm used to something sweet. Raisins, fine ones. Take them all," he recalled Petya's words. The Cossacks looked round in surprise at the sound, like the yelp of a dog, with which Denisov turned away, walked to the wattle fence, and seized hold of it.
Among the Russian prisoners rescued by Denisov and Dolokhov, okay, Was Pierre Bejugoff.
It's amazing how triggered I get by, like, I'm angry. With him.
Yeah, you're so irritated.
I'm angry with this kid.
Yeah.
There are times when, like, what are you doing?
Right.
I don't know what the anger, like, I don't know what the anger is about, but maybe if you weren't being such a fucking idiot. I'm so upset. Oh, Pierre's rescued.
He also like knew him as a kid. Like he was in that house all the time, right?
And to me, he seems a lot like Natasha.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Right.
obviously that hasn't gotten said, but I can't imagine that it's escaped. I don't know.
No, I think it is there.
This is Pierre again.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 12 is Pierre again.
Do you want to keep reading? Let's read one more, I guess. I don't know why, but death feels so much more real to me right now.
You don't know why?
I mean, obviously, there's like things going on in the world, but I think I used to be able to like shut it out a lot better. Yeah, I'm not able to. And just like any death is so scary and tragic. One more chapter? Chapter 12. During the whole of their march from Moscow, no fresh orders had been issued by the French authorities concerning the party of prisoners among whom was Pierre. On the 22nd of October, that party was no longer with the same troops and baggage trains with which it had left Moscow. Half the wagons laden with hardtack that had traveled the first stages with them had been captured by Cossacks. The other half had gone on ahead. Not one of those dismounted cavalrymen who had marched in front of the prisoners was left. They had all disappeared. The artillery the prisoners had seen in front of them during the first days was now replaced by Marshal Junot's enormous baggage train, convoyed by Westphalians. Behind the prisoners came a cavalry baggage train.
From Vyazma onward, the French army, which had till then moved in 3 columns, went on as a single group. The symptoms of disorder that Pierre had noticed at their first halting place, after leaving Moscow, had now reached the utmost limit.
The road along which they moved was bordered on both sides by dead horses. Ragged men who had fallen behind from various regiments continually changed about, now joining the moving column, now again lagging behind it.
Several times during the march, false alarms had been given, and soldiers of the escort had raised their muskets, fired, and run headlong, crushing one another, but had afterwards reassembled and abused each other for their causeless panic.
These three groups traveling together, the cavalry stores, the convoy of prisoners, and Juno's baggage train, still constituted a separate and united whole, though each of the groups was rapidly melting away.
Of the artillery baggage train, which had consisted of 120 wagons, not more than 60 now remained. The rest had been captured or left behind. Some of Juno's wagons also had been captured or abandoned. 3 wagons had been raided and robbed by stragglers from Davout's Col. From the talk of the Germans, Pierre learned that a larger guard had been allotted to that baggage train than to the prisoners, and that one of their comrades, a German soldier, had been shot by the marshal's own order because a silver spoon belonging to the marshal had been found in his possession.
The group of prisoners had melted away most of all. Of the 330 men who had set out from Moscow, fewer than 100 now remained. The prisoners were more burdensome to the escort than even the cavalry saddles or Juno's baggage. They understood that the saddles and Juno's spoon might be of some use, but that cold and hungry soldiers should have to stand and guard equally cold and hungry Russians, who froze and lagged behind on the road, in which case the order was to shoot them, was not merely incomprehensible but revolting. And the escort, as if afraid, in the grievous condition they themselves were in, of giving way to the pity they felt for the prisoners and so rendering their own plight still worse, treated them with particular moroseness and severity.
At Dorogobuj, while the soldiers of the convoy, after locking the prisoners in a stable, had gone off to pillage their own stores, several of the soldier prisoners tunneled under the wall and ran away, but recaptured by the French and shot.
The arrangement adopted when they started, that the officer prisoners should be kept separate from the rest, had long since been abandoned. All who could walk went together, and after the third stage, Pierre had rejoined Karatiev and the gray-blue bandy-legged dog that had chosen Karatiev for its master.
That's sweet. On the third day after leaving Moscow, Karatiev again fell ill with the fever he had suffered from in the hospital in Moscow, and as he grew gradually weaker, Pierre kept away from him. Pierre did not know why, but since Karatiev had begun to grow weaker, it had cost him an effort to go near him. When he did so and heard the subdued moaning with which Karatiev generally lay down at the halting places, and he smelled the odor emanating from him, which was now stronger than before, Pierre moved farther away and did not think about him.
While imprisoned in the shed, Pierre had learned not with his intellect, but with his whole being, by life itself, that man is created for happiness, that happiness is within him, in the satisfaction of simple human needs, and that all unhappiness arises not from privation, but from superfluity. Superfluity. Why can't I say that word?
You just did.
Okay. And now, during these last 3 weeks of the march, he had learned still another new consolatory truth, that nothing in this world is terrible. He had learned that as there is no condition in which man can be happy and entirely free, so there is no condition in which he need be unhappy and lack freedom. He learned that suffering and freedom have their limits, and that those limits are very near together, that the person in a bed of roses with one crumpled petal suffered as keenly as he now, sleeping on the bare damp earth with one side growing chilled while the other was warming, and that when he had put on tight dancing shoes, he had suffered just as he did now when he walked with bare feet that were covered with sores, his footgear having long since fallen to pieces. He discovered that when he was married to his wife, when he had married his wife, of his own free will, as it had seemed to him, he had been no more free than now when they locked him up at night in a stable. Of all that, he himself subsequently turned his sufferings, but which at the time he scarcely felt. The worst was the state of his bare, raw, and scab-covered feet. The horseflesh was appetizing and nourishing. The saltpeter flavor of the gunpowder they used instead of salt was even pleasant. There was no great cold. It was always warm walking in the daytime. And at night, there were the campfires. The lice that devoured him warmed his body. The one thing that was at first hard to bear was his feet.
After the second day's march, Pierre, having examined his feet by the campfire, thought it would be impossible to walk on them. But when everybody got up, he went along limping, and when he had warmed up, walked without feeling the pain, though though at night his feet were more terrible to look at than before. However, he did not look at them now, but thought of other things.
Only now did Pierre realize the full strength of life in man and the saving power he has of transferring his attention from one thing to another, which is like the safety valve of a boiler that allows superfluous steam to blow off when the pressure exceeds a certain limit.
He did not see and did not hear how they shot the prisoners who lagged behind, though more than 100 perished in that way. He did not think of Karatia, who grew weaker every day and evidently would soon have to share that fate. Still less did Pierre think about himself. The harder his position became and the more terrible the future, the more independent of that position in which he found himself were the joyful and comforting thoughts, memories, and imaginings that came to him. Did that fix everything? Chapter 12?
Yeah, it got so rosy.
Well, Pierre's a person. You think that gives you arthritis?
Cracking your knuckles?
Yeah, they say.
Really? Oh,
I don't do it that much, but I feel like I still have early onset arthritis.
that was good for you.
Oh, maybe.
Why did I think it was good for you? Like, you know when you crack your neck accidentally, you're like,
Yeah.
is that bad for you too?
It might be an old wives' thing, but where I'm from, they're not supposed to be cracking stuff because it's bad for you.
Oh,
But who knows, again, what the facts are.
Yeah. Angry?
No, I'm okay. Because death isn't anything. It's just, it's a bummer for everybody else. Like, I don't know if you were sad for him or for anybody else.
Maybe it's just that I'm starting to like people.
All people?
All people.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I think things are only sad to the extent to which you like it when you're there, as opposed to when you're gone.
He was kind of a little strong with Petya there. I was like,
Oh, I fully wondered
I didn't like,
if he would be ripped away.
I didn't like explicitly wonder it, but my whole body was like, what is this? What is this? Like last, like ninth inning investment suddenly called for in this character. Like, fuck you.
And actually, you know, I had a thought as we were reading where I was like, wait, the Rostovs have 2 sons. So, like, not everything needs to rest on Nicholas's shoulders. And
I
then
guess
thought,
it
well, it
does.
yeah. And just like all of, his mother's worry about like him joining the army and all that.
She's like,
Oh my god.
gonna be roasted. I'm so bothered that I'm on Instagram right now. Just like, next, change the channel.
Okay. Well, I hope you're all not bummed out. Have a good night.